Welcome, everyone. Hi. Hello in the chat and hello to you from the screen. We're so glad you're here. I'm Rachel Moore, and I'm the host of Bizzabo's Event Experience podcast, and I'm also thrilled to be your guide through our webinars. Welcome to 2025 Event Benchmarks, from Insights to Action. This webinar will be available on demand for your convenience. You might want to check back throughout the year and just see what the benchmarks actually were. While some of you attending today may be a newbie to Bizzabo, one glance at our website, and I think we can all agree, Bizzabo delivers the resources event planners need. And in this session, we're introducing our latest original research report, the 2025 State of Events and Industry Benchmarks. Now, some of you may be asking, yeah, what's the big deal about this report? I'm happy to tell you, it is the first of its kind for the industry. We know that you all want benchmarks so you can adapt your own event strategy. So we surveyed over 1,500 B2B event organizers and attendees to gain insights into the challenges, priorities, and expectations of both event attendees and organizers. This is going to be your ultimate resource to help you make informed decisions and strategic plans with your team and leadership. So you're welcome in advance. Let's get going. Before we dive in, we want to ensure that you're able to get the most out of today's webinar. I do want to give a little shout out to the gremlins that seem to be in the technology today. Not sure if anyone else in the chat is experiencing that, but we are going to crack on, as the British say. We want to make sure, though, you get the most out of the webinar. Please use the Ask the Speaker chat channel to submit questions, which we'll address in the Q&A session. Also, engage with fellow attendees and contribute to the conversation in the Join the Conversation chat channel. Lastly, please show your appreciation and support for our speakers by using the reaction buttons at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to test y'all to see if you're listening. Can you react to me really quick and give me some self-affirmation? I really would appreciate seeing some emojis fly across the screen. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I feel it. I feel the love. Thank you. Keep that love going, because our speakers, we're all going to feel very encouraged by that. So love it. All right. Without further ado, let's begin our journey together today. It is my pleasure to introduce today's webinar speakers. First, we have Colleen Bisconti. With over 30 years at IBM, today Colleen is the Vice President of Global Conferences and Events. She leads a high-performing global team responsible for executing over 3,000 events annually, including the flagship IBM Think and Tech Exchange conferences. The focus is on redefining event strategy and execution, creating transformative, outcome-oriented attendee journeys that deliver innovative end-to-end experiences. And very important here, Colleen's go-to event day shoes are black flats. Hey, the simplicity is there. Colleen, welcome to the discussion today. All right. Next, we have Katie McIntyre. With a career including event roles at AWS and Informatica, today Katie is the Director of Strategy and Event Technology for Opus. Katie is a creative problem solver with a passion for leveraging technology to further strategic goals. Her focus is on clear event intentions that go beyond growing networks and focus more largely on the authenticity that today's audiences crave. Who can give a shout out for authenticity in the chat? Katie's choice of shoes on long event days are men's Mark Nolan high tops with an insole. I think she said something about floating on clouds when she walks in them. But Katie, thanks for joining the webinar today. All right. And finally, we have Suzette Wilson Samuels. Suzette is the VP of Project Strategy and Solutions with Drury Design, where she oversees impactful live and digital events that elevate brands and inspire excellence. Recognized for her transformative leadership and advocacy for diversity, she blends creativity and strategy to shape the future of experiential marketing while fostering opportunities for emerging talent in the events industry. On long event days, Suzette is wearing On Clouds or Clarks, which are also great choices. Suzette, pleasure to see you here.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks also. I see everybody saying hi to our speakers in the chat, which is always what we want to see. And I think Lauren also prompted everybody, leave your own shoes, your own shoe preferences in there. But let's get started. Before we dive into our key topics, I wanted to start off with checking in with how you're all feeling about your event plans for 2025. via emoji. Thank goodness for emojis. Can we hear a shout out for that? I've seen a lot of you dropping them already, but don't limit yourself. I'd like you to use the chat. Speakers, you're also welcome to do this as well. You can use more than one to tell the story of your feels about this new year. And speakers, let's add ours too. I'm going to go ahead and react to some emojis. I see, kicking it off, I do see Kathy Chen is saying that she's got stars in her eyes, which is excellent. We're seeing 5 stars from Lauren. She's already rating the year 5 stars. Let us maintain that rating throughout the year. This is what I wanted to kind of delve into. Rosalind is giving kind of like a pained emoji. We've got keys to money, got thumbs up. Just a real quick round robin for our speakers. How are y'all feeling? Like if you had an emoji you were going to throw in there, what would you throw in? Anyone can go first. A thumbs up from Colleen. Excellent. Love it. How about thumbs up from Suzette? Katie, how about you?
What's the emoji for cautiously optimistic?
I feel like it'd be this. Like I literally just reacted like this, like the kind of the pondering one, maybe it's gonna be okay. But yeah, and it looks like we're getting some overall pretty positive outlooks via emoji in the chat. So keep those coming, y'all. I will be curious as well as we go over these benchmarks from the report. Maybe some of these emojis change. So a challenge to everybody in the chat, keep the emojis coming. Let's see some reactions as we go over some of the data from the benchmarking report, which leads me to our discussion for today. Let's all take out our proverbial stethoscopes and we're going to do a close examination of the benchmarking report. The first stats from the State of the Industry report we're going to focus on are about in-person B2B conferences, summits, and conventions. And the numbers and stats are going to be flying fast, everybody. So just prepare yourself. I'm going to take this first question to Colleen. Out of over 1,500 event planners surveyed, a whopping 66%, over 6 out of 10 of them said they plan to hold more events in 2025. And that is up 42% from last year. Colleen, why do you think there's been such an increase of in planning for large in-person events?
Great. First of all, thanks for having me. This at first seems counterintuitive, right? We're hearing that budgets are down. We're seeing that costs are up. So how is it that we're seeing such a large percent of event marketers doing more events? And I think what's happening is you still have demand for these large scale events. But other than that, our attendees are demanding more from us, right? They're looking for more authenticity in the environments and the activations that we can bring to them. And I think people are so much more precious with their time. They're not willing to jump on planes. They're not willing to give us 3, 4, 5 days the way that they might have in the past. And so that's driving, at least in my world, that's driving our ability to use data in a more impactful and effective way. So what we are doing more events, but they're smaller, they're more targeted. Right, they're localized within our market so that we're not asking attendees to put out the effort, but we're putting the effort to come to them and meet them where they want and create those more, again, authentic sort of connections in smaller groups. And so that's why we're seeing our number of events grow up. It's much more intentional in terms of the targeting and who we're trying to talk to.
You bring up such a great point there too. I think it's easy for us all to think, oh, in person, that automatically means a 2, 3, 4, 5 day conference, right? But you're pointing out that there's a lot of nuance baked in there. This could be a dinner. It could be a networking coffee or something. And we're also seeing, and I think we'll probably delve into this a little bit later in the conversation. So a little bit of those micro events that are coming, like you said, they're in person still, but they just might be a little smaller scale than say CES, right? So really important nuance to bring out there too. Curious too, are y'all planning on increasing your events for this year? Just wanted to know for IBM.
We are, but again, small targeted events versus these large. The other thing that is upping the number of call them events that we do is we're looking at those key third party events and we're surrounding them. So instead of always showing up as a big sponsor and all the expense and time and effort that goes into that, surrounding it again with those dinners or with those networking receptions. And so really taking advantage of where the audience is, but doing it again in a targeted small way to have maximum input and ROI.
Well, and I'll ask again the chat. respond via emoji. Are you planning the same thing? Want to hear? But Colleen, excellent insights there. I'm going to take this next question to Katie. I want to springboard off that last stat we shared. 57% of organizers said that attendance at their events has grown in the past year. And just coming off what Colleen just said too, that is in spite of perhaps rising costs, and maybe some more, just challenges that are out there. I would love to hear your take, Katie. What's your take on why more folks are flocking to in-person experiences?
I think when we look at the statistics from 2019, networking was such a small part of the motivation factor for attending events. And we've seen that shift from something like 16% back in 2019 to where now networking is the number one focus for most of our attendees. People are really hungry to be together, to be in person, to have these connections. We hear a lot about the loneliness epidemic that people are experiencing with this sort of disconnect between working from home and ordering everything online. And we conduct so much of our daily lives on the internet now. It's nice to have that opportunity to meet in person. And it's also nice to have that dedicated time. I think we all know the great things about work from home, but one of the drawbacks that we see is that we're expected to be always on. We're not quite having the same space made in our schedules for virtual events that we have for in-person events. So it's this unique opportunity for us to come together in a third space around a purpose that interests all of us, and to have time really be dedicated and set aside for what we want to achieve.
Yeah, I completely agree with that too. And you're right. It's more meaningful now. Like, and look, I'm just going to call everybody out right now too, because everybody who's watching this webinar, let's face it, you probably are doing it while you've got a little bit of multitasking going on here, but these benchmark stats are riveting. Stick with us, keep focused. But that's the reality of when we're joining stuff virtually versus when you're in person. You're more able to say, I've got that eye contact, that body language, and make those meaningful connections, and maybe put the phone down, maybe close the laptop lid and really engage. So you're right. I think people continue to crave that in-person stuff. And obviously the stats, the details, the receipts bear that out. So excellent point, Katie. Thank you so much. I'm going to take this next question over to Suzette, but I want my other two speakers to also be ready to answer this, because I might take this around the room a little bit after Suzette answers this. Let's end this particular section on a banger. 78%, so almost 8 out of 10 organizers said that in-person events are the most impactful marketing channel for their organization. Let's just hover on that for a second. We, especially those of us who are marketers or work with marketing teams here and we're watching this, think about all the marketing channels there are. There's email and social and website and blogs and case studies and all this stuff. There's paid ads and everything. But about 8 out of 10 organizers said that in-person events are the best, are winning the day. Suzette, first to you, agree or disagree? And if so, why?
I absolutely agree. I think the thing that we have to look at is that what in-person events do is that it creates an authentic, immersive experience. Think about the first time you went back to an in-person event, or you were able to see your coworker or your client or your sponsor in person, or a family member in person post-COVID. There's nothing like the power of a human connection. Right, that organic engagement that comes from that, it feeds the senses, it feeds into your emotions. And I think from an event perspective, it also feeds to brand loyalty. I think what we need to realize is that how we elevate these moments with intentional design, inclusivity, and the strategic approach in how we use technology is where we need to focus as we forge ahead.
And that's great insight from you too. And I agreed, because it's like, and one might even argue as well, like, there's this whole return to office, to in-person in the office thing, and then versus like remote. And, and even like, again, looking at this webinar versus if we did in person, this webinar might be thought of as a lot more accessible to anyone who I just need an internet connection to be able to join this versus, I need to get somewhere to be in person. But, it's interesting. I like that you mentioned the inclusivity and diversity there too, because you're still baking that into those in-person events and those as a marketing channel to make sure it's still reflecting that as a priority, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And we have to also touch on there's a big conversation now too about neurodivergence and how that affects, and how I think we have to look at technology, and I think we have to break the code. We are at a place now where we need to break the code yet again, the intersection between how we think, how we interact, and how we consume. So we can do all of those things. And that's when I was referring to, sensory experiences. We can do all of those things in person. But as we leverage technology, we have to find, new and different ways to diversify that as well.
Absolutely. Well, as promised, and thank you so much for those insights, I do want to take the same question over to our other two guests. Suzette, I just talked to you, Colleen. Let's go over. I'm working on my second cup of coffee, everybody. It's going to work. I want to take that same question to you. With about 8 out of 10 organizers saying in-person events are the most impactful marketing channel. Colleen, do you agree or disagree with that? And if so, why?
I 100% agree, and I agree with so much what Suzette said. I think the other thing that's important, especially in B2B, to understand, though, that even though our KPIs show us that events are the largest producer of results, they don't do it alone, right? We can't think about events as these siloed experiences. So what we really focus on is this whole idea of an omni-channel approach. And I expect the event marketers not just to be great event marketers, but they need to be great marketers. And that means, how do you know where the journey is and where do events play a role? And is it before something, after something, and really like sort of pulling that string through. And that's how we're going to continue to see events deliver the results.
Really great point. And I'm seeing you're getting a lot of reactions via emoji on the screen. So getting a lot of people agreeing with that. Katie, bringing it full circle to you. What do you think about in-person events as a marketing channel? Agree or disagree that they are the most impactful?
Absolutely agree. I will never disagree with well-sourced numbers, but I think it all goes back to the way that we as humans form memories. We're hardwired to form memories around novelty and around our experiences of novel things. So when we go to an in-person event, it's very easy to say, I remember Monday because that was the day I had that really great sandwich, and I remember Tuesday because that was the day the airport lost my luggage. And when we go to virtual events, there's not that same feeling of chronology that we use as humans to form memories. There's not that same serendipity. There's not those happy accidents. And I think so much of in-person and what makes things memorable are the peripherals around the event. It's the people that we meet in line for the session. It's the conversations that we have, in the restroom and around the dinner table. And I think that those sort of moments of human interaction become melded with our brand perceptions and our learning styles, and really help us to form those memories in a more linear, concrete, narrative way, which makes it easier to retain.
Well, and as if to support what you just said, Kathy Chen from Keystone Education Group in the chat said, trust is the biggest asset of modern businesses, that meeting in person accelerates that. And just like you said, it's helping carve, kind of ingrain that brand into the memory and the core memory and the feeling and the perception of that person who's experiencing it. And Claire, I'm gonna take a question from the chat before we move on to the next segment, because we just have a couple more minutes with this one. Claire said she was very interested to hear sponsors' interest in supporting around an event with smaller targeted events. But I have a feeling this might be a rhetorical question. I know the answer to this one. Does that create more work for the event producers? What do you all say? Does anyone want to chime in on that, on Claire's question?
Sure, Claire, of course it does. Right. But if you're doing it the right way, if you're targeting the right way, if you're figuring out how do you build repeatable ways by which to build surround events, it becomes easier on the event marketer.
Yeah. Katie or Suzette, any thoughts on that one?
Sure. I think, yes, of course, in anything times anything else, it equals more. But I think what we have to do is find ways to make the replication of it easier. Right. So if we use the tools and we use the technology and we feed it back into our lessons learned, it gets easier over time. So it's just an investment in making sure that we can deliver on the promise, and reach more people in their localized environments in an interactive and more efficient way.
Excellent. Great. Thank you all for answering that too. And you know, it's almost like I feel like event planners, especially once they become really seasoned at certain approaches, we all probably said, I could plan an event in my sleep, you know, because you're just getting so good at it through repeating it. But I think that probably supports that too, saying, hey, you get good at it with practice, so it's less work. You're able to execute it better. I like that particular question from chat really laid up the next segment we're going to go into. Because those were some really encouraging numbers, I think, for that first segment about in-person events, especially if your brand and clients are leaning into the in-person experiences. But we wouldn't have a true state of the industry if we didn't give voice to the challenges event planners face as we swing into the new year. We've already mentioned a couple of those, like maybe some stagnant budgets, maybe some leaner teams, increased costs of just literally everything. So let's address those challenges right now. Suzette, I'm going to take this first question to you.
Sure.
When we surveyed over 1,500 event planners and attendees, we revealed that sustainability is still front of mind for attendees. It came in at number one, with 18% of attendees indicating it was and is their top priority when attending an in-person B2B event. So in your experience, Suzette, why is sustainability still a major challenge for event planners, and what are your tips for trying to tackle that?
Well, yeah, sustainability does remain a major challenge for our industry. There is such a demand for greener events, and that is growing. But the operational realities of implementation, I think sourcing of materials, it also sometimes, not at most times, clashes with budget constraints, logistical complexities, and even stakeholder buy-in, right? So I think when we look at that, and we have to figure out ways that we can continue to evolve in this space. One of the things that I find from our experience at Drury is that you have to make sustainability part of your brand value. I think that if it is part of your brand value, it's in the DNA, it's organic. So it's not an afterthought. So start with the small wins, find strategic partners that you can work with, always continue to take the data and evolve from there. See what worked, what didn't. Leverage the reporting that comes from it. But if you make sustainability a brand value, it's half the battle.
Absolutely agree. And I want to say something too. I've been to my share of events. Obviously I'm not an event planner, and I also would love to go to all the events, but there's only so many days in the year, right? But I think it's so interesting too when a brand not only demonstrates the sustainability, but also gives the opportunity for the attendees to be sustainable, right? It's not just all on the brand side. Hey, we're sustainable, but you're anticipating, well, let's help our attendees be sustainable as well. What are the little micro decisions they can make throughout the event that are sustainably driven? Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think education is key, right? So education for the attendee, education for the teams, working with the venues and finding out what is working, what is evolving, in the space, and with the use of technology. I think if we leverage that and taking sustainability on an ongoing journey, the key would be to start where you are and remain transparent, share the data, and evolve your approach.
Excellent. And I wanted to call out really quick too. Kathy asked what demographic was polled for this report. Stay tuned, Kathy, because we're going to be able to provide all this and more by the end of the discussion. So Suzette, thank you so much for those insights into that question. Colleen, I'm going to go to you next. I want to highlight a legit quandary that we discovered in the State of Industry report. 74% of attendees said having immersive event experiences that allow them to disconnect is important. But kind of butting up against that, only 38% of organizers said they prioritize creating immersive experiences for those attendees. So we've got a little bit of a battle going on here. What advice would you give to organizers on stepping away from passive talks and moving into those more active, immersive learning sessions?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this stat does not surprise me at all, by the way. Creating immersive experience is hard, right? It's hard to define what that experience could and should be. It's expensive to do it well, right? And so this whole idea that attendees no longer want to be, like you said, talked to. They don't even want to try something. They want to be immersed in that to learn. And so creating that for certain brands is really hard. And so I think where the 38% of the organizers are doing well is because they're pushing innovation. They're pushing themselves to really understand what is an immersive experience, learning from others, right, in terms of how do you create those meaningful things that actually engage attendees. And then worry about the budget, right, and think about how can you do this in the most effective, scalable, and repeatable way so that you're creating it once and using it multiple times. But I think anybody that's not really focused on those immersive and engaging, call them activations, call them experiences, they're missing the mark because our attendees now expect that, right, from the events they go to.
Well, it kind of bounces back to what we were just saying about networking being a huge priority. And that's a huge way people network. If you make it more immersive, you're kind of almost, you're constructing that experience to be like, you have to interact with some other people around you. But that, like you said, that seems to be what they're craving. Yeah, it also goes back to that question earlier. Is this not more work on event producers? It's like, yeah, but the payoff from it is definitely worth it. Would you agree?
100%.
Awesome. And I like Matthew's question in the chat, and speakers, maybe when you're not in the hot seat, we can answer this in the chat. And also anyone, I think we have a room full of experts too. We have everybody attending. You all have your own experience. Matthew asked a great question. Can anyone share some killer immersive experiences they've recently seen? So yes, I would encourage everybody on that one. Katie, I'm going to bring this next question to you. On the topic of event takeaways, 8 out of 10 of the organizers surveyed said it's important to include experiential learning elements in their events so that they can enhance attendee engagement and knowledge retention. So it's not just about being in the moment, but can we send them away with stuff they're going to remember and use? I would love to learn from you, Katie. How do you incorporate experiential learning into your events? And then, also advise us, what can today's event planners do to foster it in their experiences?
Well, it all goes back to what Colleen was touching on. And we've seen this sort of broader shift in the event industry from the idea of attendees to participants to now stakeholders, where people really want to have events that are personalized, that are tailored to them, that take into account their own individual learning preferences. And that goes back to what we were talking about narrative and about having opportunities for people to get in there and get hands-on in a way that is more structured and more linear. So, if I was to give you a string of 5 random words and then ask you to recall them tomorrow, it would be very difficult to do. If we make that into a story, it's much, much easier. And it works the same way in our events. The more opportunities we give people to actually get in there and participate and get hands-on and influence the direction of the session, the less passive we force them to be, the better it is for their learning, the better it is for their memory retention, and the more opportunities that we have to bring in people with diverse learning preferences.
Well, and it goes back, I think Suzette brought up, diversity as well, too. It just adds to the whole experience. I mean, and isn't that a great way we all can learn from each other. If we got everybody attending this webinar in a big room and started doing these immersive interactions with each other, we'd learn so much. I mean, even what Matthew asked, like share some killer immersive experiences. We can all share the different things that we've tried. Maybe we failed at them. Maybe we succeeded at them. And maybe we come from a different background and we're thinking about things differently. It can all add to that. So I really love those insights that you offer. Thank you. And again, there are all kinds of challenges that our report highlighted, which again, I'm going to tease out. Just stick with us a little bit because we're going to reveal all before too long. But I'm going to move us on to the next segment of questions. Because we've been talking a lot about in-person stuff. We're all seasoned pros here. We know that in-person events don't live in a silo, echoing what Colleen said earlier. Each in-person event is impacted heavily by field marketing efforts and, not to be navel-gazing here, webinars. Those have a part to play in person as well. Katie, I'll take this first question to you. The benchmarking report speaks to a rise in micro events and field events. Again, we've kind of referenced this a little bit earlier in the chat. 64% of organizers said that they're going to use micro events and field events to support their larger B2B events. And then 77% reported that those are crucial to overall success. I would love to ask you, Katie, how and why are we seeing this level of success that makes these efforts worthwhile?
Well, it all goes back to that stakeholder mentality. You know, if we're having micro events and we have the opportunity to really know exactly who we're talking to and what their needs are and meet them at that level. So if we know that we're going to a city where finance maybe is the major industry, then we know we're going to have more discussions around finance and things that impact that industry than we might at a giant 40,000 person conference. It makes it a lot easier to meet your people when the event has been customized for your people. And it also makes it easier. You know, we think of events as this very specific point in time, which they are, but they're also pre and post and in the run up to the next event. If they're done well, they're these ongoing conversations. And when we have these hyper local events, we make it easier for our attendees to continue those conversations themselves outside of things that we host. And then hopefully those relationships bring them back next year.
Yeah. Excellent points too. You're so right too. I know we all know this, but I feel like sometimes we have to echo it to the people we work with and even our like these events don't just happen like, oh, it's just this little one moment in time. And then it's, you know, we don't think about it before or after, but you're obviously, you know, you are going to want to make that more wider. Hey, let's lead up to it and let's take conversations way after it. And I want to bring something else up too, which I think we'll probably touch on a little bit more as I bring more questions to our other two panelists in this segment, is that it can be very daunting to go to a gigantic conference or a trade show. Like just the sensory overload alone where you're just walking there like, versus kind of going into more targeted, intimate, and you know you're going to get something out of that micro event versus I have to go find what I'm going to get out of this gigantic event. It's here somewhere instead of having it kind of served up to you on a silver platter at a smaller event. So I know I'm basically just echoing everything that our experts here are saying, but it's good to ponder and just think about the different attendees and the things that they're looking for. But Katie, thank you so much for that insight. Suzette, coming to you next. I think we all know that we should be doing micro events and field marketing. Okay. We all know we should be, even again, alluding to it's a little bit more work though, might be a little harder, but I'd love to know, Suzette, what are you, and I'm going to take this around to each, to Katie and Colleen after this as well. What are each of you doing in your businesses to be successful at micro events and field marketing? But Suzette, you first.
Sure. We have to listen. I think we have to focus on the intentionality and the personalization of the content that we're creating. You know, micro events are community building, but I think what's important is that we need to create a value-driven, memorable experience with the localized focus. Right. So it allows us to be more agile and more flexible. It allows us to try new technology in different ways. We were talking about sustainability before. I think it also allows us to pilot and test sustainable practices in a smaller bespoke environment. But what it does do is create that loyalty and brand loyalty and community. And I think if we take all of the data from those experiences that are that are designed for those local communities and leverage whether it's the stakeholders that are in those local markets, leverage the speakers, the communities, the venues, we're able to capture all of those things and repurpose them and focus and see how we drive that further into the overall strategy of the whole strategy for the business, for the year long events.
Well, and someone said that earlier in chat too about it's a lot about these relationships that you are able to foster, cultivate, and build with these vendors, the speakers, the sponsors, the attendees that keep coming back for these. So excellent point there. Thank you so much, Suzette. I will take this. Katie, I'm going to come back to you actually to answer that same question. What are you doing in your business as far as micro events and field marketing to be successful?
So we like to kind of go through and identify the levers that we can play with, the areas of opportunity to expand and to personalize and to really hone in on the specific market, and then pair those with the tried and true, the brand values, the brand messaging, the things that need to stay consistent city to city for it to be recognizably a brand X event. And I think that there's a lot of space in those two things for balance. So you have the overarching sort of playbook. This is what we always do. These are the things that are important because they're important to the brand. And then these are the areas of opportunity where we can explore, we can flex, we can, and then you sort of A/B test and you take the things that work and you apply them in other places. And the more you find things that consistently work, the more you can make those part of your overarching playbook. So I think it's that balance between the musts and the cans, and finding opportunities for both inside of your standardization that really help us identify opportunities.
I just want to give a big shout out that you mentioned A/B testing. Anytime anyone brings that up, I feel like I should have like a little party sound go off. I love when anyone brings that up because it's one of my, we should all be A/B testing. It's so great. But thank you so much, Katie. Exactly. On point for that and really good points there. And then I'm going to bring it back over to Colleen. Same question. I think you've actually spoken a little bit about this in an earlier question too, but recount for us again, what are you doing at IBM for micro events and field marketing to be successful with your overall event efforts?
Yeah, so I don't think of those as separate, right? But I think of those as part of our sort of book bag of things that we have that we can use. And the most important thing is that we use data effectively because we know more about our clients and potential clients than ever before. So how do we make sure that we're using that data to create more meaningful experiences? So instead of asking, actually engaging. I think the other thing when I think about our entire, again, omni-channel down to the event portfolio is make sure that you're thinking about where you meet the client where they are on their journey, right? It's not a cookie cutter approach. And where those micro events come in really effectively is as you go down funnel, right, at the account level or with the individual. Now, all of a sudden, that targeting, that smaller group, that focus, bringing in the right SME or the right executive at the right time, that's what those micro events allow us to do. And our field marketers have the relationships. And so by partnering with them, it's the right time, right audience, right?
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Talk about lead nurture, right? I mean, you're like, hi, we saw you here and come to this little more intimate. It feels so exclusive and you get that FaceTime and absolutely and it's literally bringing them down the funnel. I love that. Colleen, I'm going to stick with you as we go over this final question for this segment. And again, bringing it back full circle, we're talking about webinars. We're going to prove the point with this last question. Webinars still have a place in this world. And as we all sit in a webinar and talk on a webinar and chat in a webinar, 53% of attendees said they plan on attending more webinars in 2025. It's important to note that's compared to 29% last year. That's a huge jump. Colleen, and then we might have some time to take this to the others as well. How is IBM thinking about webinars? What is your approach there?
So webinars are near and dear to my heart. I personally do not view a webinar as an event. And I know that's blasphemy in some circles, but I view it as a digital tactic, right? A digital tactic that should be used, right, again, where the clients are on their journeys. I would love to see this same group of people surveyed a year from now saying, did you do it? Because I think all of us are well-intended, right? We put webinars on our calendar. We can't make it. We plan to look in the replay. So I think what we need to do is make sure that we're not flooding, right, our attendees with lengthy lists of webinars, but rather being mindful and specific. I think there are things, and we've talked about it on this podcast, there are things that work way better face-to-face, right? But there are things that work way better digitally, right? And in my world, that's technical education, right? I don't need to bring somebody to a room to put headphones on and just sit in front of technical education for 2 hours. And so really being mindful about when do you use podcasts versus when do you try to bring people in face-to-face. So it didn't totally answer your question, but I think webcasts are an important thing. We just have to use them purposely.
As someone who hosts the Event Experience podcast and also hosts these webinars, I think you make a lot of sense there because it's like, well, I mean, and we were even going to we repurpose these actual webinars into podcasts. So it's like, there's a lot to ponder there. Very excellent. I'm going to take this, quickly go to the other two panelists too. Katie, I'll go to you first. How about webinars? Are y'all planning webinars this year?
Yeah, we still see webinars playing a part. Fewer and fewer of our clients are actually trying to host digital events. And I think it's for exactly the reasons that Colleen brought up. There during the pandemic, your audience was a monolith. It was everyone. Now it's not. So now you have the opportunity to get that data and to understand the kind of person who prefers to engage online, the kind of person who prefers a webinar to an in-person event. And they are there. And the more that we learn about them, the more we can tailor things in a way that is specific to them and to their interests. And as Colleen was saying about technical education, honestly, it's often, if you're not actually hands-on with the tool, with a trainer there who's coming to you and answering your very specific questions, isn't it better to have something pre-recorded by a professional speaker who is reading from a script and isn't umming and awing? And there's so many opportunities there. But when we see it work best is when there's that extensibility. And that goes back to what you were saying about taking it, turning it into a podcast, and taking the insights and publishing blog posts, or maybe having snippets of the most interesting segments that are parsable, that go with sort of our time availability and our attention spans these days. So where we see it most effective is when the webinar is sort of the point in time moment for those interested, specifically for this audience, because we've identified who they are, and then redistributed to fit the learning styles of the rest of our audience. But when it's very intentional and very specific.
Excellent. No, very, very great point. I love that too. And then also, Suzette, taking it lastly to you. How about you? Are y'all planning webinars this year?
I think webinars need to be and considered part of the holistic strategy for the brand. So how you implement it and how many and when and why needs to be front and focus when you're looking at the holistic strategy for the goals that you need to to attain for that given year or product launch or whatever it is. I think looking at how we leverage the content that is specific to the webinar and the audience that is receiving that is critical as well. Colleen was saying, there are things that are organic for webinars. I think the use of technology will be interesting for us now to see how the webinars themselves evolve. I think we have to look at, I don't want to get in and stray us away too far, but I think sometimes you have to take a look at what's happening with our climate. And we're talking about micro events. All of those things can impact. So we have to be agile in our thinking. We have to, we have to take all of our strategies and be adaptable in what we need to get to what audience at what time with what solution. So it's still an important part of the overall tactic and strategies that we have to use.
I really appreciate all three of you really gave some nuanced answers to that question, because you're obviously thinking about it. How does this fit into our overall brand, overarching brand, who our audience is, where they want to be, but you're being very strategic about it. You're not just literally like saying webinars, and which it's great. And so you're just really setting the example, I think. And what I'm excited about too is because thank you all too, because we got through those segments. I'm actually leaving us a little bit more time than normal because y'all have been busy in the the Ask the Speaker channel. So keep those questions coming. We've enjoyed this first segment where we kind of had these planned questions. We're about to get into the part where we're going to answer questions from our audience. Before, though, we dive into that Q&A, we've walked the gift into the room. I teased this out several times. It's now time for you to unwrap the gift. Get your own copy of the 2025 event benchmarks from Insights to Action reports, the thing we've been referring to this entire time. And we barely even scratched the surface. We've given you all on a silver platter a lot of the kind of numbers and stats that we discovered. There's way more in the report. The link is in the chat. Plus, you all will each get an email of that link as a thank you for joining us today. We want to give you a gift that keeps on giving throughout the year as you kick off with this first digital tactic that we have done today on behalf of Bizzabo. Now, let's dive into some audience Q&A. We're still taking questions, so please don't hesitate to put those into the Ask the Speaker chat. But I'm going to go dive into the list. All right, there's a lot here going on. First, I'm going to hit this one. And speakers, I'll let you all, whoever wants to kind of jump on it first, please don't wait for me. You can all unmute and get ready for this. What are your best tips and tricks for measuring ROI on revenue-driving events when you don't have a scanned lead list? And then also, what are your best reporting tactics for measuring brand impact from events? So does anyone want to hit that one first?
I think on the lack of scanner, and that's a problem. I think it depends on what kind of data you have accessible, right? And can you match back who you might have seen or who you might have captured, even if it's with a business card, back to your own sort of client database? And how do you almost backwards engineer what that lead was, or what that lead might become, or what the interest area was? So it's a tough question, but I think you've got to get creative in terms of using the data sources that you have within your companies.
Sounds right. Agreed. Yeah. And excellent question. As far as like best, and then let's go a little broader this one, because that one's a tough one to answer too. But what are y'all's best reporting tactics for measuring brand impact from events? Like, there are scanned lead lists. If you can get that, that's obviously something you're like, ooh, we got these leads. But are there any other metrics y'all are using to kind of measure the impact of your events from a measuring brand impact standpoint?
It really depends on it really depends on the definition. So I'm always encouraging people, since I sit sort of in the dark, half on the technology team and half on the strategy team, that those things really need to be very directly linked. I'm a huge proponent of the strategic impact of event technology. And it goes back to building all of our technology and all of our data collection mechanisms with intent. So knowing before we build anything, what exactly is the data that we're looking to get out of that, and building it with a reporting first mindset. So identifying what we need to measure, who it needs to go to, the channels in which we're going to deliver it, and then building back to those data collection mechanisms that will enable it. So it really depends on how we're defining brand impact. It really depends on whether or not we're defining that as increasing funnel or brand awareness or brand loyalty and ambassadorship. All those different things will have different mechanisms and different levers that we need to put into place in order to be able to capture the impact. So I would just say, again, going back to that intentionality, thinking of everything you do in terms of your events in a reporting first way.
Suzette, how about you? I see you nodding.
Yeah, I think we all do it, right? We listen, we research, we design, but I feel like sometimes what we also have to do in real time, not just post, right? In real time at the events, whether they're micro or larger B2B, find different ways and different tools and solutions outside of a scanner to get real-time feedback from the attendees, whether you're incorporating use of influencers or different ways to work through how we network and how we formulate the information that's coming back, and getting real-time feedback from what's happening at the events will be something that we should lean in a little bit more on. Because what we're seeing too is that we all have consumed and retained things way differently than we did 5-8 years ago, based on the fact that we were all sitting behind these screens for 3-4 years. So
right.
We have to retrain our brain and retrain how we communicate and how we retain and how we leverage the technology in order for us to receive that feedback, and then take that feedback and then apply it again for what we do the next time around. I think it's just a revolving door. It's a revolving door, and we have to take that data and reapply it.
Excellent point. All right, let's move on to another one. This one jumped out too, especially in light of us talking about costs and just kind of knowing the environment we're out there when we're dealing with negotiating and stuff. So this one comes from Leandra Amodovar. Sorry if I hope I pronounced that right. How do planners negotiate when the venue and their suppliers are owned by the same company. She brings up like, i.e. Hilton and Encore. Any advice y'all have around that? Because we talked about the challenge of those increasing prices and stuff.
You negotiate hard, long, often, consistently, over and over and over again. I mean, I don't know how else to, to say it. I think you have to build the relationships as well with, with the venues and, with the suppliers. But I also think we have to challenge, and it's not always easy. We have to challenge what's there, because sometimes, depending on when you enter the relationship, it's after the contracts and whatnot are signed. Right. But that doesn't stop you from asking the questions and, and going to bat and finding new and creative ways to figure out how we get to the goal. And I think with communication and invested relationships with that, things can happen. It's not always easy, but it can happen.
And then just to follow on, Suze, for a couple of things that you just said, I think it's also important that you don't come at it from I need to cut costs, I need to cut costs, I need to cut costs, right? But you have a mentality around how can I gain efficiencies? How can I create different experiences, maybe at a better price point, so that you're not seen as this person that's just, trying to whine and moan about a budget cut, but you're being very creative about how you can jointly solve whatever situation you're trying to work on together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, Katie, were you going to offer something there too? Didn't want to step on you.
I was going to say, thinking in long terms, thinking not just for the moment or for this particular event, that overarching relationship, and having sort of a multi-year or multi-event plan in place where you can apply that slow, steady pressure. A lot of times that's where we see movement, is when you're not going, well, for event A, I need this concession or this change, and for event B, I need something completely different. But where you have this overarching plan for sort of incremental change in the areas that matter the most to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add to that too. But with Katie, I also feel like we're trying to solve something in the moment, right? We're trying to solve, come up with a solution in the moment. And I think if we're going into it as a collective team for the end goal, we all want it to be good. We all want it to be great. We all want it, to meet all the objectives. And I think if you go into it from a partnership perspective, and explain what the challenges are, and 1 + 1 = 2, yes, but how can I get there? How can I get there? How can we get there together, right? And what can we do? How can we change what you thought it was? This is what I said. I drew you this beautiful picture. This is what I'd like to get out of it, but how can we get there together and come up with something else that can be more cost efficient and effective as well?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's one of the things that I think of often is, yes, 1 + 1 does equal 2, but -1 + 3 also equals 2, and 2 times 1 also equals 2. So there's a variety of different ways, as you said, if you're willing to work in partnership and be fluid on this is the ultimate goal, but the getting there doesn't have to look exactly as either one of us has defined. It can be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. That was some great dialogue. Thank you all for those insights on that. That was obviously a big one for everybody. I think we have time for about one more question. There are a lot too. So if we don't get to your questions, please know I think we've dropped the links to each of our speakers in the chat, so you can definitely keep pursuing the answers here. This one comes from Crystal Brown. She says, what does the trend of micro events look like for freelancers who want to create immersive experiences at a small scale but aren't necessarily connected to a larger company? Any insights on that from our panelists here?
I think this is such an interesting opportunity for freelancers. I mean, I can only speak to what we see here at Opus, but it really does, this hyper local really does give us a lot of opportunities to reach out to freelancers and to artists and to creatives in that community in ways that we might not have for a larger event. If for 40,000 people or whatnot, we're probably going to go with a very established agency or fabricators or shops that we worked with before, because there's so much budget at play. There's so much potential for calamity. For these smaller events, we're much more likely to reach out and try to find something interesting, something, so I think it's a great opportunity for freelancers in that space to sort of show Yeah, show us cool things. Show us the things we can do that A/B testing. We can see, if this works for 10 people, and if it does, we can scale. I think it's one of the best things about these smaller events is that we get to see so much real innovation so rapidly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thoughts from either of the other of our two panelists on freelancers.
Sure. I mean, we leverage a lot of local, freelancers as well. And I think it's important for you to also align yourself with the venues and the conferences and the convention halls so that more are aware of what you locally can bring to the table. I think reaching out to, to the creative agencies as well, and having a plethora of solutions that you can add to a creative solution. I like the idea of, I'll give an example. We did a program in Texas in November, and what our goal was really and truly to leverage as much of the local community as possible. Yes, you can bring someone in, but we're trying to be sustainable. We're trying to limit costs. We're trying to, maximize on every dollar, and being able to go into the communities and go to the venue and ask the venue, I need this, that, and the other from within, because I want to spend the dollars locally in that market. I want to be as sustainable as possible. I think so as a freelancer, making your brand and what you can bring to the table known to more within the industry locally would be helpful, because that's how we hear it. We hear it from the local suppliers and venues and whatnot.
Yeah, so really good point about branding yourself, marketing yourself. Oh my gosh, marketers who have to market yourself, it's a tall order, but we all, we know it has to be done. It's been a good webinar when we literally wish we had another hour, but we don't. So I am going to now utter the words. You all know what's coming. Thank you. Thank you, Paul, for the amazing questions and insights, everyone. But that is all the time we have for today. There were so many great questions y'all dropped in the chat too. So please do go follow up on these. Keep asking them. This has been great. I want to extend our heartfelt thanks to our distinguished speakers, Colleen Bisconti, Katie McIntyre, and Suzette Wilson Samuels. I think I speak for everybody. We are all so grateful for your time and knowledge today. And my goodness, our audience today, you kept it popping. Thank you so much. I cannot express that enough. It's always a great webinar when it's hard to keep up. So thank you so much for all the great engagement. Before we part ways, a quick reminder that this webinar was hosted on the Bizzabo Event Experience OS, showcasing the power of innovative event technology, all of which we're probably going to use the rest of this year. Woohoo! For those of you who may have missed any part of today's session, or you'd like to revisit the content, fear not. This webinar will be available on demand shortly, so you can go back and absorb all the insights at your own pace. And we will also be sharing the full 2025 State of Events and Industry Benchmarks report with you via email later this week. Thank you once again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at our future events. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.